Thank you. Well, my name is Mike Remington. I'm Mayor Pro Tem for City of Duval, and this is our City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. It's now 5:34, and we will call the meeting to order. And our first item is good of the order. Following that, we will have 5 agenda items, including a COVID emergency update, city attorney services, the 2019-2020 budget amendment restrictions. Item 4 is our Deputy City Administrator contract amendment, and item 5, ordinance for utility service for occupancy. So we'll begin with good of the order. If any council members would like to speak this evening before we get started, you can just give me a dot. We'll recognize you.
I have a little poem to inspire us. It goes. This has been on the wall in my family's house forever. It says, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when you want to laugh but you have to sigh, when things are getting you down a bit, cry if you must, but don't you quit.
Well, thank you for that. We could use some inspiring words. Very well said. I do think it's important to recognize there's a lot going on in our country, a lot going on in our own county here, and recognize there's a lot of people hurting inside. I wanted to say how much I appreciate Amy McHenry posting some words from City Council just to the community, really relating the heartache people have over the recent death and resulting protests. A lot of people hurting across our country, and I'd like to just recognize that up front. Some of the business we have this evening will be related to that as well. Other council members that would like to speak this evening? Councilmember Iyer.
I just wanted to, I don't know, give a shout out to the city website services that we have. I've been, I get all the outward facing email notifications about meetings and stuff. And although it's kind of hard to find the council packets and the agenda, it's not hard, it's not impossible, but it's a great tool for any citizens that are listening if they want to keep up. It's a good automated system that you can log into, you can sign up for, and then get great notifications from the city. So I'm constantly having trouble keeping up with number of phones, and it's a great tool that sends it to your personal email. So it's a thank you for whoever's running the website. It's still working.
Thank you for that, Matt. You're looking awfully clean cut for being in a pandemic.
This is my haircut that I can do myself. That's it.
Yeah. Are you out for hire? Because I may have you come in.
I get. It's no Mr. Laniszewski haircut.
Thank you. Other council members would like to speak this evening. Councilmember McHenry.
Yeah, since you brought it up, Mike, I just wanted to double check. I was trying to look back through the agenda. Is the potential statement from council on our agenda tonight, or is that something we're adding, or should we discuss it now?
Mayor Okerlander.
Yeah, so Amy, I was just gonna have you take the lead on that under my report, because we sent that out, what you wrote out to council, which I thought was awesome. And then we can, you can just ask for a motion from the group, and it'll be pretty simple. So we don't have an agenda bill, but it's also pretty informal.
Okay, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for doing that for us. Any other council members that would like to speak? I don't see any. Oh, Councilmember Napland.
I just wanted to bring this up a little more informally if we're talking about it in the main council meeting. But on the emergency declaration of civil unrest, I just wanted to ask, and I know there's so much going on, but in the future, if something is likely to be added to the agenda, if we could just get a little bit of a heads up besides, I mean, I'm thinking that you wanted to have everything lined up and ready to go before you released it. But the trouble is I got asked a question about it yesterday, midday. I got a call asking me about it. And I thought, oh, surely you must have misunderstood. I've heard nothing about this. So if something's in the works that you think likely could be walked onto the agenda, if we could at least find out something about it ahead of time, just I was really caught off guard, and it's a little bit embarrassing as a council member to get asked questions from someone outside of the city.
So I can answer that. And the reality is we started having discussions yesterday, and Eileen and I were emailing back and forth late last night regarding this. And this situation has arisen so fast and so fluid. We had to do research to determine if we needed to do anything at all. So in situations like this that are literal emergencies, we don't have time to do that, and we got it out as soon as it was humanly possible. So to put it in perspective, I've already worked 26 hours in the last 2 days, mostly related to this and the issues that we're dealing with in the city. So yes, we do everything we can. You got it as soon as we could possibly get it out, and typos were found and fixed in the meantime. But you did get it as soon as you can, and we're not going to send out draft product publicly until it's ready for a public consumption and is finalized with our law enforcement.
I guess I don't consider being a council member the public, and so just a heads up to council. At least we got several other emails from you about other things, just to say, hey, I'm working on this. I don't know if we're going to need to do it, but I'm working on it. It's on the burner. That's just all I'm asking, because it would be really helpful for me to know if something's even being worked on.
We didn't know what our end result was going to be, and we're not going to discuss 500 different options until we have an option that we're moving forward with. That's operational. And if I start talking about it with council, then we can't get our job done internally. So I do appreciate that, and I understand that. However, this is not a normal time.
Jennifer, thanks for bringing that up, and Mayor. I do think the point's really important to make, that some of these things are, as the Mayor said, are ongoing, they're fluid, but it is important that council get notified as quickly as possible, even just a heads up that, hey, we're working on this topic. We don't know what it'll look like. So I think that's what I hear from you, Jennifer. And Mayor, we do appreciate the challenging time. I know there's a lot of meetings going on regionally dealing with some of the emergencies that are ongoing currently. One item I have for the good of the order, this is summertime coming up, and folks might be resuming some of their vacation or travel or staycations with kids. I would just request that as soon as you know what your vacation schedule looks like through the summer, if you could send a note to Jody and then CC me, just so we can make sure we have a quorum and have an idea who will be there and who will be away. I think a couple of council members have already sent us some information letting me know that they won't be able to attend a couple of meetings this summer. So anyway, if you could put that on your personal calendar and let us know, that'd be much appreciated. Well, we'll move on to our first item. Before we get started, I wanted to say we have 5 items. We don't normally do that, but we wanted to try opportunity to have items that are on our regular council meeting on our schedule here, so that we could make sure we had time to talk to them about them in a more relaxed setting, if you will. So with that, we'll get started on item 1, our COVID emergency update from emergency management, about 15 minutes.
Yes, sir. Hello, Mayor Pro Tem Remington, council members. It's Sean, City of Duval. I think I heard that to mean hurry up, Sean. So I'll, whether it was on purpose or by accident, I didn't have as much information prepared today. So we might be able to cruise right through it. So, all right, here's the screen share. Where's my PowerPoint? It's somewhere in here, maybe. I don't know. Show me some windows. There we go. All right, and again, I shared this out just before the meeting as I'm finishing it. And I don't know if we're going to talk about this at all in the or in the committee or the council meeting. So if somebody has a question, holler. A lot of this is pretty typical. So again, here's the situation at the last update. So just 2 weeks ago, roughly, this is where King County was at 75.15 and 528 deaths. And again, the percent positive rate and total tests. So then we can again jump forward and see that there's been a difference. Again, the total test is coming up, which is great. The percent positive is coming down, which is also great because again, it's just showing a lower infection rate and an increase in testing capacity. So these are generally good things. And again, just kind of the metrics that we're kind of living and dying by, I mean, figuratively right now. So in statewide situation is similar. Again, a lower instance of infection rate amongst the total population tested. And again, that might be because how different counties are doing it. We really don't know. But again, you're seeing a difference amongst the different counties, which plays into where we're going in the phases. So this is the infection or the hospitalization rate. And I also added the age ranges in here as well. So again, you can see the trend lines for the different age groups and how it's been affected. And I don't know if you guys see the same window I see, so I'll drag this over here. But you can see where we are at currently. And again, how that looks. So much has changed with these phases. I added this much more pleasing infographic rather than the old phase map, which I had dates that quickly died. And even on here, these dates are far different. So at least for locally for King County and for some other counties. But again, I think we know that one of the big differences is in this safe start and the modified versions of the phases. So King County was supposed to have applied today for the modified phase 1.5. And their guidance was that the earliest that businesses could expect to enter into the 1.5 conditions would be Friday. We haven't heard any new updates on how that went. A lot of attention has been going over to the protests and that other actions right now, but we can assume hopefully they did in fact submit their application today, and that hopefully we will get a rather quick turnaround. The state was saying between 24 to 72 hours is where they were typically moving these applications around in. And if you aren't aware, the phase 2 regulations provide, or the modified 1.5 does open up a bit of activity. So there's a lot more in personal services and professional services, and allows some opportunity for businesses to have outdoor seating at 50% capacity. We did talk on a chamber meeting about polling that community and finding out what their needs are, what their ability is, if some of those businesses needed or had an opportunity to expand, if they could take advantage of some of that and open in some capacity. So we're waiting to hear back from chamber. They're going to poll their members on some of that. But again, our position as a city has been to try to assist in any way we can to help move things along. So if there's a spot that we can help, modify a process, or we can help guide their way through what would be a typical application process for cafe seating or something like that, we have an interest in trying to assist those businesses in taking advantage of what is available, even if it's in an unusual fashion. Financials. So, and you'll see this in a minute. So these are all the typical slides. We're still talking about CARES. We have items on the agenda for the council meeting about this, so we can go into details there. There's not a ton, other than we have some contracts available to us now. But again, we're still looking at those right ways to best utilize the CARES program, and whether it be for city programs or for outward facing programs that help businesses or community groups. That's definitely something that council is going to be a part of and going to be part of the discussion on. So financial impacts. So here's the incident expenditures. What we don't have, and again, you'll see it in the next slide, is we don't have updated labor costs because the pay period is just too tight to this meeting. But you can kind of see the summary of those categories of expenditures: equipment, services, supplies. We have a detailed running list of what all those AP items, and again, a lot of them would show on your AP runs that you get in your council packets. But again, you see the labor costs mixed in there on that top table to the left. And then again, the breakdown. And I know there's some disagreement on those tables. I didn't quite get a chance to sort through when those were updated. But again, you see the general picture of where it's at. And again, you see the AP runs by pay period or by council meeting. So again, those are things we've continued to report, and we have details on some of these that we could try to pull apart and make available. But again, you're seeing the generalized categories, which is how these are typically reported. So there you go. There's your big red no update available. We don't have anything new on that. It's the same information we had before. Same with utility billing and those account receivables. So not anything new on that either. There was some discussion, I think it's in here. We still need to go through some guidance, and we talked about it as a team, but again, these protests have kind of taken over some of the things we were intending to do. But we still have some discussion about exactly how council is going to want that repayment schedule to be, and engaging with council on what the right window is for repayment schedule, and how we do that with our customers who need it. So Stephanie, I believe, was doing some outreach to some of those customers already, and just kind of some reminders of people who are getting maybe abnormally high bills, and so some of those processes have started. I put on here in this parking lot list, I know that there was a desire to see a detailed expenditure list, and so that is something I intend to work on. I just want to make sure that we understand whether it's the item, the cost, and disposition, like where it's used, or again, what we have been showing all along is the categories of cost in equipment, material, supplies. So we've been breaking that down already. Again, I'm not sure whether council wants to know whether, where each mask went, or where, anything like that. But again, we can modify some of that information. We have a lot of data. Again, it's taking the time to distill it down to something. So, and then again, we'll talk about those requests for public assistance. Those are on a council agenda that we can talk a little bit about that further, or if you guys have questions about it now. I'm doing awesome for time. I think I'm at 6 minutes. So then I just wanted to put one slide in here, and again, we can talk about it later. We can talk about it at council. And this is like next to nothing, but there has been a completely separate incident of COVID. So now we have 2 concurrent incidents that are happening right now in Webb EOC, and the King County Emergency Management is helping manage. And so this is the protest support. It has a state mission number because it's supported and has been official by the governor. And a lot of what we're getting information on is from King County Emergency Management. A lot of this started on Sunday. Obviously, Seattle had an incident going on over the weekend, and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And we started talking pretty detailed with the mayor and chief on, Sunday evening, as we're seeing some of these protests develop, and kind of looking at, well, what if and what happens. And so we got together first thing Monday morning. And then again, the ball started rolling more, and you get some more information. And King County has been sharing some of that, and they've looped the county cities into the Washington State Fusion Center, which is, I put the mission in here, but again, what it provides us access to is detailed intelligence, and they do analysis also of what that threat and hazard matrix looks like, and what specific threats there are for certain communities if they have them. They're also providing generalized intelligence about threat types and trends and what they're seeing. And so again, some of that has been starting to inform our decision-making process, and it's definitely, to the mayor's point, kind of what we're looking to respond to. And so there was another one of these intelligence meetings today. And again, all of that informs our decisions and kind of how we posture ourselves, not to give away too much, but that's kind of where we're at. So that is really the end of my presentation. I went record time.
Thank you. Nice job, Sean. Any questions for Sean? Councilmember Hoag.
I think she's saying,
I can't hear you yet.
My unmute button
Here.
disappeared. Sorry. So my question has to do with, so that I'm assuming the expenses that you've shown us so far aren't any of the things that we're going to need for future things like hand sanitizing things. None of that is included in that, correct? Like retrofitting and all the things that we want for the future isn't
correct. Yeah, we have an active bid out, or not a bid, I shouldn't say, but we're expecting an estimate back on some retrofit for City Hall. Now, some of the hand sanitizer and personal type supplies, masks, things like that, we are upstocking. So we haven't used all of our inventory. We have been working to accumulate an inventory that we know will sustain for, I think for a reasonable time frame, for months. It's not like we're using everything we get our hands on. We are upstocking and making sure that we have material on hand. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Councilmember Naplin.
I just wanted to follow up on what Michelle was saying. During the Finance Committee meeting, we requested a forward-looking budget for the coronavirus response, just in a real big high-level numbers. And I sent an email about it during the meeting, and I'll just like retrofitting buildings, IT expenses, vehicle rentals. That's something new. Wash stations. We heard that maybe there'd be wash stations. Have to pay rentals. We've been paying for extra cleaning, I believe, and that may have to continue. So just kind of a budget of things that are ongoing, some one-time. We don't need exact dollars, but just at least a placeholder, even if we don't know how much it costs. And then, even just the cleaning, like when we open parks, are we going to have to be sending people out there to clean the bathrooms more frequently if those open? There's just a lot of things that if we could just get a list and just some real high level understanding of per month, this is how much it costs to be having someone come in and doing extra cleanings and, renting wash stations for parks or different things like that. Just somewhere where we can just get a list and just a budget of each, like how much is the monthly cost of this going forward if it continues. And we'd asked for it a couple times, I think, and it definitely came up again at the last Finance Committee meeting. So I don't know if, I know you're super busy, so I don't know if that needs to become an official request of council, if I need to ask for that.
It does not need to become an official request. As we've stated before, as we get that information, we will provide it to council. Sean is working on a bunch of that stuff. It's not ready for council. We don't know yet. And so, as you know, as we just discussed over the last few days, we've been completely sidetracked from what we were working on related to COVID. And, Sean, Sean and I talked about a time estimate, of when we might be able to get that done. However, we haven't talked about that issue since we started this whole new issue with the civil unrest. So Sean, I can't remember what the date you were talking about that you thought that you could have some of that information ready by.
Yeah, so I intend to go on vacation on June 15th. So on or before that date is my intention. And again, I think making sure I understand, so a detailed list or a breakout by category, which is typical to how we reported equipment, material, supplies. And that one would be a lot easier than the other, but that's where I need to understand exactly what's being looked for.
I guess I don't even understand the difference between equipment, material, and supplies. They all sound very similar. So
well, I suppose I should say.
I guess yeah, I don't understand.
Yeah, I should have said services. I apologize. But yeah, okay. So some of those would be equipment like computers, TVs, things like that. Materials would be like hand sanitizer, thermometers, and then services would be cleaning and professional rental, that kind of stuff. And then we also have salary.
I guess I have to hear what other council members were asking for. I guess I was, anyway. I think Dorothy is trying to mention, she was at the meeting and
like everybody froze on my screen here for a minute.
Froze.
Okay, it looks like folks are back. Dot, you had your hand up, Councilmember Langel.
Yeah, I'll try to flesh this out a little bit more. First of all, what I was looking for, and I think Finance and Administration talked about, is getting a target date. Target, we know sometimes we hit target, sometimes we don't, but what we're trying to get a handle on, since we're going to do a budget amendment, is doing a little bit, a step beyond that amendment, so we understand a little bit what the back end exposure is here. And so if you're willing to work with a target date of June 15th, at least for speaking for myself, that would be fine. I think what I'm looking for is something that, these are estimates and we get that, but what I'm looking for is enough of a description and some numbers that tie to a description that give us a sense of what additional projects you all have, administration has been thinking about, between, I guess, now and the October 31st deadline under CARES. And I know you're soliciting information right now and it's fluid, but I think what's hard is we don't know what those potential projects are, and we don't know what your priorities are. So if we can get that type of a description and some numbers that would tie to activities, then we would have a basis for predicting not just future budget impacts, but also eligibility. I absolutely believe that you'll do everything you can within eligibility. So, but there's also the possibility that items will have to fall under the 25%. And then, who knows with FEMA, right? So,
is that helpful? Are you getting what you need, Sean?
I think I understand a little more clearly what you're looking for. I think some of it might still be a little bit moving, but I think I see where you're going. And one thing I skipped over in that list, and I touched on it last time, is that we did receive a guidance document that did say that CARES will be eligible to fill that 25% FEMA PA gap. So we can leverage the CARES funding, so we won't have that typical 25% city match. We can utilize CARES to backfill that.
and then I would just add, we'll have another Finance and Administration Committee meeting too. So before you go, I think. So there's an opportunity to give us whatever you got at that point, and then some feedback before the 15th. And then there may be things we still don't know, but at least we then can identify, here's something we think we might need and we don't know. So.
Well, Sean, thank you. Much appreciated. Good work. In the next about 55 minutes, we're going to move on to item 2, our city attorney services, general municipal law contract from administration. I will remind folks, we do have Eileen Kiefer with Madrona Law and attorney Steve DiGiulio with us, who's been helping with contract language. So if, I don't know.
Mayor Pro Tem Remington?
Yes.
I did want to also mention that we had invited Debbie Sellers from WCIA because there were some insurance questions that continued to come up. So we wanted to make sure that she was here to answer any of those questions for the council as a whole.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And Debbie, welcome to you also. Thank you for being here this evening. So I'm not sure who from administration was going to discuss it, or if we're just going to move to questions or input from council. Dot, you have a question.
No, I wanted to set a context because we could get a field if we don't set the context. And what we worked on was a template. And the purpose of the template was twofold. Number one, to prepare a template. If we're going to invest all this money, prepare a template that can be used for legal services across the board. Second objective was a recognition that different type of legal services and different types of law firms will have different scopes of work potentially, and therefore a different paragraph, number 1 in the template that was provided through administration. So that's a very important distinction, because when a contract comes to council, the mayor would, with the template, use options to individually, and that would then be the basis for discussion and vote. And so Eileen has done a very good job, I think, within the template of showing some options. And we wanted to do it that way so that council, other council members, all of you, come along in your understanding of how our legal contracting could work moving into the future. And so our template work was not tied to the Madrona contract. The second point is that when I started this, I wanted these two things bifurcated. And I wanted them bifurcated for several reasons, but the main one being that until we get a template that works for us as a city, it's pretty hard to look at a specific contract for a specific firm. And so the way I see this rolling into the future is discussing the contract template today, and then at the next council meeting, getting the nod from from the council that yes, this is the template we're going to use. And along with that, then the mayor can bring the Madrona contract forward using the template and the specific options she would prefer. So since insurance is one thing we might talk about, the insurance level in the Madrona contract she desires would be a simple example of how a template would be used. But if we keep having legal contracts be moving all over the place, it's not an efficient use of legal time. And it's not a way to bring council along in understanding their legal contracting process.
Dot, it looks like there are 5 potential options in the first section here. And I don't know if council members are ready to suggest one of those options now or want to discuss those first set of options. Some of those involve Mayor Pro Tem conferring with the mayor. Some are a little simpler and straightforward, where the mayor would be able to choose and move forward on certain items. Which attorneys are dealing with, what portion of the work we're doing. So Dot?
I just want to, again, emphasize the one option will never work for all firms. And that's why it's designed. That's why. So when you approve the template, you are not specifically approving one option. The discussion was not designed that way.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because there will be times when a mayor wants to prefer one option over the other, and then that would be the one she would, bring forward. Otherwise, you're spending tons of time every time developing new options and these, by the way, are options that are very common in different legal contracts. We weren't just like fabricating them.
Councilmember Brudnicki.
So I read through all 5 of the options, and I guess I really want to know, I guess we would ask the mayor, which one of those will work the best for our current system and for mayor and staff.
Well, that's a tough one. There are, if council's just approving a template, I'm fine with whatever's in here, but there, and forgive me for not having the time to fully review this one, but there was a provision in here about, at least in the last version I fully reviewed, that the mayor pro tem must approve any firm use of lawyers identified in Exhibit B or otherwise. And I think that can create some real challenges with actually getting the business of the work done. Prime example is last week we had to have a special meeting to extend a contract to continue with attorney services. And when you're coming to some of the things that staff are working on, the firm, I believe pretty strongly that the firm needs to be able to determine who their best person is. And while, right now we have an excellent mayor pro tem, 5 years down the road, you might have a mayor pro tem that is completely in conflict with the mayor. And that could create some significant problems with the city business moving forward. So that's my concern with that provision as far as it being an option. But other than that, I really don't have any issue with anything in here. My goal is to get us to a point of procuring attorney services so that we can move forward and get on to, be able to focus a lot more on the important work we have ahead of us. So, I mean, other than that, it's fine. It's just, we have recommendations from our insurance company on insurance. We follow those with the Madrona contract and what have you. But that's really the only provision that gives me heartburn. And it's not because of Mike, it's because of forward thinking down for the future.
Do you know what number that is? I don't have the document in front of me. Is that
Yeah.
number
Provision 4.
four?
Provision 3.
3. It's 3, isn't it?
I think there's a couple of them in there that include Mayor Pro Tem.
Most of them say consultation.
Yeah, there was one, following consultation with the mayor pro tem must approve. So I read that as, and maybe I read it wrong. That might not be the exact one, but anything, just in general, I'm fine with anything unless it's, the mayor, it's option 4, other than the designated city attorney and designated backup as identified in this agreement, the mayor and mayor pro tem must approve any firm use of lawyers identified in Exhibit B or otherwise. And that's where I think that creates a challenge and will, in the future, create some potential problems and conflict that doesn't need to exist, as well as make it difficult for the city to carry out routine business.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
Yes, Diane, go ahead.
Yes, and in the past, because I've been here so long, throughout the 14 years, I have seen many times where you have that sort of conflict. It gets very political, and that is my biggest concern, I think, when we create these types of guidelines, that I want to make sure that we don't put something in there that creates a gridlock or stops the business of the city happening, because there may be that kind of conflict. Because we do have that, a strong mayor system. So I just make sure with the options that we don't create a situation where it could get very political.
I can address option 4. I think if you look at it, I know the mayor is swamped, so she hasn't probably had a chance to really. This provision, this idea came out around the issue of what happens if your designated attorney and the backup are incapacitated. I think Eileen used the example of in a car accident. So you have an extreme situation. I think if you read on further, and maybe this should be tweaked a little bit as an option, which you could do in a specific attorney contract coming forward. But that was where this idea came forward. Like, okay, what do you do? They're not available. And in that type of a situation, there's a need to confer, because the firm represents the entity of the city. So that was the origin of it. I think it goes on in the event that the city attorney and designated backup are unavailable, parentheses, for example, if they're in a hearing, they're ill, or otherwise indisposed, was the examples.
Other comments, questions? Councilmember Naplin.
I just wanted to double check. When I was reading through these, it's not like you only choose one option. They're complementary, and so you could choose multiple options. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because at first I was like, oh, I need to pick one. And then I read it further and I'm like, oh, no, they kind of all build on each other, and you can include them or not include them. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Other questions or comments? I don't see any currently. Further down, there's additional options as well. This has to do with the insurance coverage, liability insurance, professional liability, And I believe it's option 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And there's been a fair amount of discussion over this. I think the last contract I saw had 2 million in there. Some council members suggested that we have a higher amount in there. And I do believe Debbie had provided some feedback to us as well and recommendations for the mayor and council, from our insurance carrier. Debbie, I don't know if you've seen those options. Do you want to say a few words while you're here?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So in the most recent contract that the mayor forwarded me, I did take a look at those various options. So the first thing I want to tell you is that most professional liability policies have the same per occurrence or per claim actually limit as they do an aggregate. So you don't usually see a higher aggregate. Not that it's never done, it's just, it's not commonplace. For a city attorney contract, I'm comfortable with the 1 million per claim and a 1 million aggregate. When I saw the latest variation with the 4 options in it, that was not an option. So I recommended to the mayor. I got the impression that council wanted higher limits. So I recommended to the mayor that those limits could be increased to 2 million per claim, 2 million aggregate. And that would suffice as well. So if you want options in your contract, then I would recommend they be commonplace in what you'll see from law firms. And so depending on who you're contracting with, some firms may have more coverage than that for professional liability, some may have less. So I was fine with the 1 million per claim, 2 million or 1 million aggregate. But if council wanted to increase those limits, I chose the option of 2 million per claim and 2 million aggregate.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Lingle. I think you're muted, Dot. There you go.
This is my issue from the beginning. And just to be clear, where this came from for me was after reviewing a number of contracts for law firms. And I can use several examples. How I started the research was I identified small cities, the top small cities in Washington state that were experiencing high growth pressures. And part of that high growth pressure is often that you're now dealing with development companies that are national and have resources to bear in a dispute that Duval frankly does not have. And so we want to be sure that when our law firm does work, that they have made sure that they are either able to take on that specific task, they bring in someone else to help them, which is what Richfield did, by the way, or if they're going to take the risk, that they have the coverage for the city of Duval. Let me give you an example. Woodinville has higher limits. Port Orchard has higher limits. Kenmore has higher limits. Those are just 3 off the top of my head. I have looked at others though. So I'll just be really specific. We are now dealing with development companies that are on the New York Stock Exchange. They are no longer the development companies that we dealt with for the majority of Duval's history. And so we really have to tailor our liability coverage as a city to the situation we're in now. And having some options lets us do that. It also lets us tailor the situation, as Debbie mentioned, to the firm that we are working with. And so one of the development companies that we have working in Duval right now, very large firm, uses attorneys that I'm familiar with because of something else I'm involved with in my private work. And I can assure you that law firm will run us into the ground. I mean, this is a law firm that deals with international developers, and they have got the resources to be very, very difficult. And that means City of Duval has more risk. So we want to make sure that if there is more risk for Duval, and there is, let's just say, an unintended mistake, that the coverage is there for the City of Duval. So we have a different situation. Duval is changing. We have to be looking to other cities that are going through similar development pressures. And what I saw was these higher limits. In two of the examples, it was 4 million and 4 million. I can see situations where it could be less, but that was why I've always wanted higher professional liability limits.
So Dot, primarily you're talking about land use issues that come up, other things, but primarily land use decisions.
Right. Yeah, and you can have it, there's a couple other things we could be exposed on, but with land use, well, what we've seen and experienced in the last year, or at least, and what we could see with annexations in particular, is these situations where we're entering development agreements and they go on for years and years and years. And so, you know, there can be consequences that impact us financially. And, you know, we can't just be looking in the short term. We have to look at the magnitude of risk we take on when we enter into a development agreement.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, the point's taken. Debbie, can you help? Most of us don't deal with insurance all the time. So for council members, this is a little bit outside. I think Dot has much more experience with it. Could you help us understand, you know, you've made a recommendation on it. This is all about managing risk in my mind. And we certainly have, you know, our own insurance as well. How does those play in? I mean, sometimes if you reach the limit on one, the other might kick in. Do we have additional coverage we might have from the the larger group of cities?
So it really depends on what the claim revolves around. If there's a land use issue and a lawsuit is filed against the city for, let's say, arbitrary and capricious decision-making of the council, you could have coverage under WCIA, which carries a $25 million limit. I have certainly, and even WCIA, it truly is a decision that needs to be made by council. And if there's a high level of concern that you want higher limits for, that's totally understandable. But in my mind, before you worry about insurance limits, you should be worried about the makeup of the attorney and the legal firm that you're bringing in to represent the city. So I can tell you in land use, yes, we do have coverage for specific parts of land use claims that, you know, would really, the only way it would have any correlation with your city attorney contract is if there was some allegation that the attorney did A, B, or C that created the issue. So there's not a black and white answer here. There's no right or wrong answer here. Everybody has to be comfortable with, you know, the coverage options that you put into play. And, you know, you may never have a claim with your city attorney, or you might. There's, you know, I can tell you that they are, you know, from my experience, they're not very common. So I certainly understand, though, that if the city feels that they need to rely on the expertise specifically in the land use area, and you want to, you know, contract with a law firm that's got, a strong issue related to land use, maybe you want higher limits for those risks. I can also tell you though that if you come up with a situation that you may have a land use claim coming down the road, or you think you might, you're concerned about it, we also have a pre-defense program in which the city can contact us and say, we have a potential land use claim, this is what's happening, and we actually will retain a defense attorney to work with the city and see what the exposure is. And that's not at the city's expense, that's at WCIA's expense. So that's one of the services that comes with being a WCIA member. So to me, the limits, it's whatever you all are comfortable with. I have no, I don't have any ponies in this race. I'm just here to give you some recommendations from the standpoint of, what I've seen in my 30 years of insurance. So it's what makes you guys comfortable.
It really helps to have your professional experience and view on this as well. Most of us don't have that kind of background. It's nice to know that the WCIA has a 25 million limit and that there could be help. Again, we're trying to manage risk. Your recommendation, I think originally was 1 million and 1 million, 1 million claim and 1 million aggregate, but you also said you could support the 2 million per claim and 2 million aggregate if we wanted to have additional coverage. Is that still correct?
Yeah, I mean, my input is whatever insurance level you want to go up to. And if you want to go up to 4 million, that I would just make your, like I said, it's not common for there to be a different aggregate than a per claim limit. So whatever you want your insurance to be, if you're going to go with 4 million, that it costs more for the law firm. If they don't have that insurance, they may not, from a bid perspective, they may not want to even provide you with a, with the response for your request for services. So, and I don't know, my understanding was that was already done and everything was in the works. And then things got changed. So again, I don't know if the current firm you're looking at has that level of insurance or not, but bottom line, I'm just here to provide recommendations for members and give you the sort of hey, have you thought about this? And certainly I can understand Duval being one of the few areas left where there's some room for development and wanting to have that expertise behind them. And if you're more comfortable having a firm with higher limits, that's certainly fine.
Well, thank you for helping us as we work through this. Dot, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to point out, go again back to something we worked on with Eileen, which I thought was extraordinarily helpful. One of the things that we talked about, and she gave us some new language around, was when a firm finds themselves in a situation and they have to make a judgment about whether something is within their capability or not. And we have to remember that there's a lot of money in legal work too, right? So the advantage of a professional liability insurance that's higher also benefits the firm, because if they wade into an area that they didn't expect to be as difficult, or if they misjudge a situation and think they can do it and they can't and they do make a mistake. That's what professional liability insurance is really about. It's not about just someone suing the city. It's making sure that if there is an error, that the law firm and the people in the law firm are not separately, that they are responsible, that the interests of the city are covered if an error occurs. Now, of course, she's absolutely right. The trick here is making sure your law firm and the structure of that contract make sure that in those difficult cases, that additional help will be brought in when it's needed. And that is precisely what Ridgefield did when they were sued over an EIS statement during an annexation. Their attorney looked at the situation and decided they needed additional assistance, and they brought in another firm to assist them. And that was a wise choice, because, you know, if she had tried to do that by herself and there had been an error, you know, she's liable. It has nothing to do with whether the city is just sued. And I suspect, and I'd love to hear from Debbie if I'm guessing wrong, but if something is an error that costs us, meaning that costs the insurance fund, they're going to want to have some recourse to recoup whatever they have to pay out. I doubt that it might cover us, but they would want to be sure that if there was an error, that they were reimbursed, the insurance fund, if somebody was negligent or whatever. And for goodness sakes, let's pick a firm that doesn't have that problem, right? So she's really right about that. But that's why the options were written the way they are.
So with professional liability coverage, you, the city, have the contract with the law firm, not WCIA.
Right.
We cover the city. So if the city's contracted attorney makes a professional error, it's the city's claim to pursue. We have no privity of contract, and it would be up to the city to provide and put forward a claim against the law firm for professional malpractice, is what it is. And through the investigation of their insurance carrier and so forth, it, you know, did they do something wrong? And if they were, what damages are there out there with regards to the city? So WCIA would not have a claim in and of itself. Now, certainly if the error resulted in some form of damages that WCIA is somehow, you know, has coverage for, then there definitely could be, you know, sort of a three-party situation where we are looking to the city attorney and their insurance with regards to the claim. It's just, there's no, I can't tell you how every single situation would in fact play out. But definitely, like I said, I would go with an insurance amount that you are comfortable with. And I am always, if this is something that's just a big area of concern for the city, then go with the higher limits and see how that plays out with the law firm that you're looking at, if you really feel that the risk is there.
Mayor, you had input?
I just had a question, and this is for either Debbie or Ms. Sellers or Mr. DiGiulio. And we're talking about things that, you know, we're already told are pretty uncommon. And to my understanding, the firms that we're looking at, you know, none of the attorneys have had bar complaints and what have you. So Mr. DiGiulio's been around a while, you've been around a while. How often, or can you give a guesstimate of how many times in your entire career have you seen municipal firms commit malpractice or get into that situation where a city needs to make a claim against them?
So that, Mayor, that was a question for Steve or Debbie.
I'll just, it is rare, but it does occur. I'm not, you know, I've seen most firms subject to claims for error in legal representation. In many cases, they are second guessing the judgment of the firm In other cases, they're obvious. When somebody's missed a deadline for filing of a matter is the more common and most obvious of bases for claims, so it does happen. It is interesting that right before I joined the council meeting today, I was working on an engagement. I will not tell you who the client county was, but I will tell you in just a moment what that county's coverage demands are for our services. And of course, I've got so many documents open, I'm not able to see them. But I'll pull it up and make sure I'll report it before we're done here. But the basic answer is it does happen. And but that really doesn't affect, I think, what the council believes is the appropriate level. Yeah, I'm looking at professional liability, and this is a county contract demand, and it's 2 million aggregate and 1 million incident, including for professional liability. It is low, but it is that county's particular standard. And remember, the size of the firm also provides for some security as well, because whether it's insured or not, there is still the obligation of the firm with respect to the obligation. And so obviously we cannot insure to the limits of the bond opinions that we give. So when we give an opinion on a $100 million bond issue, you can't insure that. But that doesn't mean that the law firm isn't still exposed if there was liability arising out of a mistake that we may have made with respect to our work on the bond issue. So you're never going to get coverage, full coverage, but you get basic coverage that for the most common incidents that you would have. And just in response to that, two and two is not uncommon. But I also don't have any disagreement with the council members' observations about what other cities have done with respect to their professional liability coverage for attorney support.
Steve, thank you. Very helpful. Councilmember McHenry, you have a question?
Yeah, Debbie, I was just wondering, I think I heard you say that it's most common for the per claim amount and the aggregate to be the same number. Did I hear that correctly? So my question, I guess, for everyone just to think about, I don't see, hearing everything I've heard tonight, I don't see the harm in keeping these options in a contract template just so we have options easy to grab. But based on that one thing that Debbie had mentioned, I was thinking, do we need to add an option that's 1 million per claim and 1 million aggregate, just so that we don't ever, I mean, maybe this is more for DOT, if the goal is to have all of our options available in this template so we don't have to reinvent the wheel to put that one in, or I don't know. That was just my only thought.
I don't think you have to have all the options in the template. Just as a point of reference, in our old Kenyon Deason contract, we had $3 million aggregate. So if you were, and that was, I think, in 2012. And, you know, obviously it's become an increasingly litigious society, and we are in King County. unfortunately for us in some respects. So, you know, if we had 3 million aggregate before, and Debbie's point is it, you know, typically is the same, then that would lead us in the just, you know, in the direction of 3 million and 3 million. So I don't know that 1 million and 1 million needs to be in the contract. It's always, you know, when the mayor brings something forward, she can always propose something else, right? The illustration here is what's super important, that we understand that risk can vary in different times and with different types of firms, which is what Steve pointed out. And, you know, in a very complicated situation like we are now, where we have the possibility of annexations, we have very large developers, that's a different risk than, let's say we just have a side contract for, well, something Eileen knows a lot about, utilities. What if we had a separate, you know, utility services legal contract? The risk there might be far less or far more. She can tell me that. And, you know, so 2 million and 2 million might be fine, or maybe the 1 and 2. It really is designed to be, to give us education as much as options.
Eileen, you had your hand up.
And I just had one point too, just from you know, being in part owner of a law firm, the amount of coverage that a law firm has largely depends on the kind of business too. So if we don't do bond work, but if we did bond work, we'd have a heck of a lot more insurance.
Right.
And then also some firms, like Steve's firm represents governments, but they also represent developers. They also do a lot of private work. There are particular areas that if a firm has a group that does, say, estate planning, you can be on the hook for some huge claims. So they may have some huge insurance. So if they're representing Port Orchard, they may have the 4 and 4 just because of this other practice group needed that much. So just one other thing to keep in mind, the type of work that the firm does will dictate what kind of insurance that they carry, and certain types of work are a lot more risky than others.
Thank you, Eileen. Well, I think we've covered this pretty thoroughly. Again, this is a template, and the options within the template just would allow council on different contracts to say this is what we'd like to have. Councilmember Iyer.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. I was just going to speak to that point, that I think it's a good conversation to have, you know, with these types of agreements. And I think that I don't know if you need every variation of option, but I think it draws the conversation to this point and to this exact conversation. So I think it's a good to have the at least one option in there to indicate that it is a variable that should be considered.
Thank you, Matt. Well, I think it's time to move on to our next topic. We probably only have time for one more, which is the 2019-2020 budget amendment and restrictions. Dot?
I just wanted to make sure that we are going to move this to the next council meeting for blessing, so that the mayor always knows what the template she's working from. I mean, we haven't taken any action. We can't take action in a cow. So it would need to get blessed in some manner.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just want to take a moment to thank Ms. Sellers and Mr. DiGiulio for joining us this evening. It was very helpful and much appreciated as always.
Yes.
No
thank
problem.
you. Stay safe.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye-bye.
And don't forget Eileen, she did an awesome job.
I don't think Eileen's living yet, but yes, she does an awesome job. She always does.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm afraid you're stuck with me for the rest of the meeting because I worked on most of those items too.
Well, I don't know if we're stuck with you. We're happy to have you here, Eileen. So let's move on to budget amendment and restrictions. This is also on our city council for discussion and potentially for vote as well. Are there council members who wish to speak to this? Councilmember Naplin.
I just want to thank everyone who's worked on this. I know Director Mason has spent many, many, many hours working on this. And anyway, I just wanted to recognize her. I know Dorothy really fine-tuned the language and made sure it represented at least an idea of the dollar amount, which I was a little hesitant at first, but I see the value in trying to put a dollar amount to understand what the restricted amount is. So anyway, I just want to thank Finance Committee, Director Mason, just for working through this.
Thank you.
Yes, Dot?
And I just want to say the amount the mayor put forward, she was very open to this idea, which was awesome. And the amount that she put forward in the ordinance that we'll vote on earlier is fine with me.
Any other council members wish to speak to it or have questions before we look at it again at city council meeting? I don't see other hands up. I'll say as well to Ian Mason, our finance director, you really work closely with us. I appreciate you helping us set it up for success, to be able to understand the categories and why the number is what it is. Help us to focus in on what is changing and what additional monies would be requested in the budget to be able to true us up and move things forward. I thought that was very well done. I thought your presentation, can't remember if it was our last meeting or the one prior now, but was very well done. And I know it's a lot of work, especially with your coming in at the first of the year and helping us through this. And this is a big step for us. I think it helps set us up for success as well in our next 2-year budget.
Thank you very much. The Finance Committee has been pretty awesome and asked a lot of excellent questions. So I really appreciate them. There's my son, Luke. Yeah.
Well, thank you. If there's no other questions or feedback on that, I think we've got time here to jump over to our next one, which is our Deputy City Administrator Contract Amendment. This is under new business, item 5 on the council meeting packet. We didn't have anything in our COW packet, but it is on the council packet. Are there any questions or feedback on this topic?
I just wanted to point out Dot caught something that was a clarification and worked with Eileen on that today. So instead of just saying amended, it says appeal and replace. So that it's very clear to anyone reading it that it's taking back something else that was in the contract and replacing it with what's in now. So other than that, I think it looks pretty good. We did have a talk about, as long as the position goes forward, that the stipend, if there is a COLA each year, should go up with COLA, which I think is very reasonable. And when we look at those personnel policies with outside pay, which we won't be calling stipends, those are kind of the inflators that we'll be looking at as well. We also set reasonable hours as far as a reasonable expectation of limits per month. That Ms. Thomas will be working with me directly on that to make sure that we're not putting her in a position of 20 hours extra a week for DCA roles, when really at that point you really should just have a full-time position filled. So that'll help balance workloads and set boundaries as well, and help her get to her planning work while still supporting administration and council.
Dot, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to think that this is something I alone identified. It actually came out of a conversation with Councilmember Hogue, where we were, I guess, celebrating that we're not using the term stipend, because it's been a point of confusion and unintended confusion. And by doing it the way the mayor presented it, and then when we did the repeal replace thing, it just cleaned the whole thing up. So Councilmember Hogue deserves some credit on this one.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Councilmember Holt, you get your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dot, but I appreciate working together on it, actually, and I appreciate Eileen jumping in so quickly on it. But I did have a couple things. Eileen, did you send out a change? Because did it come out late today? I didn't see it.
I sent it just to Councilmember Langle and the mayor and Laura. I can't remember, but what I'm happy to do is send it around to all of you now so you can take a look at it. It's where you see 1 and 2, and it'll say, instead of amended, it'll say repealed and replaced. But it's in red lines too, so I'll send that to the group now so you can all see it and easily identify it.
I have a couple other suggestions or questions, I guess. At the top, it says interim city administrator. I think that should read deputy city administrator, where it says professional services.
Yep, that was an oversight typo. Jody fixed that.
Good.
Yeah, this afternoon.
And then the other thing is I'm confused on this CPI because you mentioned Mayor COLA. So if there is going to be a COLA on this, then we don't need the language in here about CPI. It's in the paragraph, section 4.4. It's on the first page. Because CPI is different, right? I mean, I know that the amounts are similar, but CPI is different.
There's a good chance the CPI is less than the COLA.
Exactly.
Well, and Dana's workup says COLA, this says CPI, so I don't know if they need to match.
Can I make a request? I know we've done this with other things where instead of specifying exactly what the increase is, whether it's the same as, if we just said, if it increases the same as the base salary, you know what I mean? Because then if we updated our methodology for how we calculated COLA, then we'd have to go and find all the little places where we'd also mentioned it. So if we could just say something like, it will be adjusted the same as the others, if that makes sense. I know we've done that in other areas just to simplify our life so we don't have to go and find all these places if we change methodology. That's just my request. Simplify.
Dot?
I mean, makes sense. I don't know how that, I didn't go that deep into this thing, and I don't know how, I mean, I just think it's worth noting that she's an exempt employee, so I don't know how exempt employees are treated for COLAs in their contracts, and I guess it could be different for different directors because the contracts are done at different times. That would be something I would know.
Well, in general, you know, like our pay scale will go up by COLAs. So when you look at that, the pay scale that's approved in the budget goes up by COLAs. In general, you know, we have very few of these types of contracts out there, so it's not difficult, I don't believe, for our finance department to track. But you know that there are times when management exempt employees do not get COLAs, when the rest of the folks do. So this also allows it to remain consistent with that, which I think helps eliminate some confusion if you're in a situation where your represented employees are getting a COLA, but your management exempt are not. Ms. Kiffer or Dana might be able to pipe in on that as well.
I think at this point, non-representatives and represented employees are getting a COLA based on a rolling average. It's a rolling average of the CPIU. It's like a 10-year rolling average, so it kind of smooths out. So
you're saying that the CPIU that's written in here is the same as COLA?
No, it probably should have been changed to COLA. The CPIU can be really big one year or really small one year. So the city has been using a 10-year rolling average.
And the intent was COLA, so that was just what we didn't. It was just a minor oversight.
Well, I can tell people are reviewing this information, so it's easy to miss those items. Well, we're at 6:54, and we have one item left, which is utility service for occupancy. I'm going to suggest that since that's under new business first item, or under, I'm sorry. Well, I'll just say it's on our council agenda. So I'd like to go ahead and drop the last item so we all have time to log off and log on to our city council meeting. Is everybody okay with that? All righty, I see thumbs up. So the committee of the whole is adjourned, and we'll see you at city council meeting in a few moments.